the importance of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence in relationship to the perennial activity of human beings in philosophy and religion to imagine what God would be. That interaction is a remarkable coherence, because are we special? Most religions have, at least in the past, claimed that were the case. So if you were to discover intelligent alien life, would that undermine at least the traditional God that we are all used to dealing with?
Yeah, Robert, I see that question as nonsense. All right. If God exists and extraterrestrials exist, God was responsible for them, so how can their existence undermine God? If God doesn't exist, there's still the question, do extraterrestrials exist or not? It's an open question to be asked of the universe and hopefully answered with experimental methods. And so I don't see it as being a real question.
So it may not be a real question to you, but I think for some it would be. Now, I happen to be of the opinion with you that a common response, so often there's the idea that in Christianity there's this notion of somehow being central, that Christ came to earth and that salvation only applies to human beings. But if you look at what some theologians have said, that there's a real openness. There's a Christian conservative theologian, Hal Ostrander, at Southern Baptist Seminary. There's a person who is opposed to evolutionary theory, a very strong believer in biblical creationism. But he says, similar to Jill's argument, that if in fact there is intelligent life out there, that does nothing to change the relationship between God and humankind, in the same way that if a young couple decides to have a second child, it does nothing about their special relationship with their first child. You started out talking about whether there is something about our sense of specialness that will be reduced if we make contact with another civilization. And I think it's important not to conflate the notion of specialness and a sense that there may be other civilizations out there as well. To the extent that we think that we have to be somehow unique, we're not going to be threatened by discovering extraterrestrials, because there is going to be something inherently unique about us, about our civilization, about our biology. We can't help but be unique in the sense of being idiosyncratic.
Well, let's look at the realities that some people, many scientists, would look to the search for extraterrestrials as a weapon to attack what they would believe to be the destructive approach of traditional religion in saying how special we are, and that the discovery of extraterrestrials would in fact undermine this God, which may never have existed because of the way we've characterized it. But some would say this is very good, and they hope for the discovery, if only to undermine that religious tradition of specialness and triumphalism that may in fact do a lot of good for humanity, because it would destroy a lot of the problems that we see in the world.
Well, actually, I think that this whole idea of having any confidence that a particular discovery might undermine organized religion is, I think we've seen millennia of the counterexamples. Organized religion is extraordinarily flexible, and over the past thousands of years has been able to adjust itself to accommodate different cosmologies, different knowledge. And I would be very surprised if most organized religion would not be able to embrace the new knowledge that there are other intelligent civilizations in the universe.
Because the critical distinction, if we actually do detect extraterrestrials, is having some incontrovertible proof that there is someone else out there. Even without that, there has been a range of theological speculation. And I think the real challenge is as we try to anticipate the nature of extraterrestrials, how do we avoid transposing our way of conceptualizing ourselves, our relationship with one another, our religious concerns onto other beings? If you look at the responses of Catholics to the idea of what would extraterrestrials be like in the first decade of the space age, there was this wide range of views, but really implicitly behind these views was a notion of the myth of Adam and Eve, that somehow that the story would be retold on other worlds of whether indeed other civilizations would be elevated, whether they would fall, whether there would be a redemption. And people laid out various possibilities of how other alternatives might or might not exist on other worlds. So I think the real challenge is for us to be open to extraterrestrials being very different than we are. Some have said that if extraterrestrials have a religion of their own, if they're much more advanced than we are, it would be very difficult to resist that. I don't buy it, because I think that our religions serve human needs for some people. For some people, there's no need for a religion.
In your planning for communications, simulating possible communications with extraterrestrials, after you get through the prime numbers and the mathematics, does philosophy and religion ever get in there, and you ask them, hey, what do you believe and what it's all about? Or
we haven't we haven't so far gotten to that point, but I think it's certainly legitimate. And because our philosophical beliefs, our religious beliefs, our aesthetic beliefs are an important part of who we are. The important thing that we would need to do, though, is to be clear that these are issues about which we do not have a consensus. But if we really want to describe the breadth of human concerns, let's not focus on a message about which we have consensus, but actually talk about our diversity of views.
Well, actually, Doug, it seems to me one of the things that you've tried to do with your research is to look cross-culturally and across religious spectrum and try and find out if there are any human universals. And if there are, that might be something that we want to brag about or tell in a message.
So an example would be work that we have done on how we might encode one of our highest values of altruism. So we've gathered specialists from a range of disciplines, a range of nations. And I think the big value of our work is really realizing how we continually fall short of our attempt to be globally representative. That in a meeting that had people from 10 nations, at the end of it, we realized, hey, these are primarily folks from Europe and North America. And when we talk about altruism, we were focusing on people being altruistic toward other people. When we engaged with Indian scholars, they said, hey, wait a second. If you look at notions of altruism in Indian nature religions, there's much more of a focus on being altruistic toward other species, of having a more environmental consciousness that we missed the first time through.
I see two very strong areas that need to be thought about. One is the universals that we have, and the other is the richness of the diversity. I think it would be very exciting to transmit the idea of our diverse approaches to meaning and God and all of those things. I mean, that would give it an understanding.
Actually, Freeman Dyson is very fond of teasing me when I get up and say that in the SETI community we have informally agreed that should we receive a signal, that we would not transmit any kind of response until there was some global consensus on who should speak for Earth and what should we say. And Freeman just looks at me and he says, you gotta be kidding. As soon as you announce a detection of a signal and give its coordinates and its nature, anybody who can get their hands on a transmitter is going to. And he says, and wouldn't that great cacophony be about the best description of 21st century Earth that we could send?
And that's the last communication you'll ever get from those guys out there.